Hey guys, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to an exclusive video where I want to give you a behind the scenes look at my latest movie, Reptile. Reptile is nothing more than just an improv project in my opinion. It's just a movie that I just wanted to make for fun and just for, because it's just something I've wanted to do for a long time. And let me just say right now that Reptile happens to be one of the biggest projects and one of my personal favorite hard-working projects I've ever made. I have made so many hard-working projects over the years, but none of them could come close to Reptile. It's nothing more than just an improv compilation of videos that I just made for fun, and just give it the impression that it is a movie when it really isn't. But I just wanted to give it a look and feel of a movie with the ratio and all the acting, all the scenes, the soundtrack, everything, storyline, etc. This is basically the first time. This is actually the first time since 2014 that I've actually brought in the Reptile character, because the Reptile character has not appeared on Shizzle Network since 2014, and I finally brought back Reptile, but this time in a movie format. Now, just because I'm doing this into a movie does not mean Reptile is over. It's just something I wanted to do for fun. There are plenty of episodes for That's a Man Reptile that I want to do in the future. I just gotta make a new intro, that's all. I'm probably gonna use it as a compilation of videos from the Reptile film, just for the sole purpose of for the intro of the show. I don't know. But enough of that, let's just cut right to the chase. As you guys probably already know, I have confirmed that it took me 3 months to actually film this movie. I shot it from October to January of 2016 to 2017. This is actually quite fun to work with, and because of how fast production went, that's why the movie came out really early. Though expect to see the roast show and final cut on March 3rd. Basically, those movies are gonna have some footages that you've never seen before, including a mid-credit and post-credit scene with an exclusive soundtrack as well. So it's definitely gonna be completely different compared to the current cut of the film, which is actually the director's cut, as this is a cut that I've made personally myself. Now on to the looks here. Now the cinematography was done all by myself. Basically, what I did was that I shot the entire movie using my iPhone 5. And basically, all these footages were uploaded onto my Microsoft OneDrive. You can see that once I turn on the cameras, I run to a certain position where I want to shoot the scene, and then that's when I just start going with it. For the big example is the beginning of the movie where Reptile is seen walking in South Philly. This is actually at my dance school, and at the time when I shot this scene, we were having a Halloween show, and it was actually quite fun to work with too. And as you might have guessed, I also once again recorded 2 separate footages and compiled them together for the purpose of editing. So basically, I recorded 2 separate footages of Reptile walking down and just compiled it together to make it look like that he is actually walking. And once again, so like I said, making this movie was actually quite good. So as you can see right there, I'm actually walking back, taking off the Reptile mask to take care of the camera. It was actually a fun scene to shoot. There were many other scenes I've also shot, that I also shot for the movie at the time. The other big example is the scene where Reptile is, talking to the camera and stuff like that. So basically, I had to sit that up against a railing where my dance school was at, just so I could actually do that. It was actually something. You might be noticing that Reptile was actually walking back and forth, but I actually did that because I couldn't find any other position to put the camera at. In any location down the street where I was at. If I had a tripod for the camera at the time, I definitely would have done it at a different location. But I just wanted to do this because, like I said, it was just something that I was experimenting with at the time, so I wanted to see how everything would turn out. Obviously, the scene where Reptile is, talking to the camera once again, the camera was obviously in his hands, and, he was just talking about, reviewing his crappy games and such. Another very complicated scene was the scene where Reptile is walking in a ceiling where there was a Halloween decorated room. Once again, this actually took place inside of my dance school at the second floor. Basically, we had a bunch of Halloween props and stuff like that, and Reptile just basically walked in trying to figure out exactly what it was. And also the one part where he also sees the statue creature, the skeleton, that was another Halloween prop that we set up. And once again, putting this together was actually quite difficult. Basically, I had to make sure that the same video was recording at a time, but I had to split them up and compile them together, basically jump cutting. So basically, you could safely say that a majority of this movie's editing involved either jump cuts or camera panning or effects and such and such. I would say most of this movie mainly consists of jump cuts, especially two separate footages compiled together, especially when it comes to Reptile and Larry doing a conversation. Another scene that was also quite fun was the scene where Reptile was also shaming the cameraman for constantly recording something that's irrelevant to the movie. When I actually recorded this scene, I was actually doing a favor for a friend. I was actually walking to 7-Eleven to pick up Nutellas. I have no idea what they are, but basically I was doing a favor for a friend at the time, but I felt like I wanted to record the scene as well just to add some comedic effect to the movie. One very noticeable thing that I really enjoyed was shooting the scene where Ricky Caleb sees that Reptile is, recording more videos for Shizzle Network, and so he decides to hack the Shizzle Network. That was actually quite fun to do. And then, of course, you also have the scene where Reptile walks inside the door. I had to turn on the camera, and then I had to walk out of my room door and basically close it, so that way it will make it seem like that, Reptile is walking into his house and stuff like that. So it was actually quite fun. Again, this is actually during the same night that I recorded those. This is actually during the same night that I was actually recording. That I recorded those scenes. Actually 2 nights later. Actually, recording the perfect weapon scene was also quite fun. Originally, this scene wasn't actually going to be part of the movie. Instead, I was actually going to cut it out entirely because at first I thought this scene was actually a bit too lazy. But after watching it and realizing how funny it was, especially for the movie's liking, that's how come I decided to actually keep the scene in the movie. Because if I actually removed this scene from the movie, it would have been a huge mistake. Thankfully, I kept Perfect Weapon in. Now the scene where Reptile is also talking with Larry after he discovers that Shizzle Network gets hacked was also quite fun as well. There were this is an example of 2 video footages that I set together, that I actually recorded together to compile into one another. The phone conversation between Reptile and Larry. One interesting scene that was actually pretty interesting to shoot was the scene where Larry, that's a fictional version of myself, was basically outside. I was outside in my backyard, and I had a chair and I had a camera, obviously, and I just sat it right there. You can see that once I started recording the scene, I was on my tablet setting up the call alarm. Now, my tablet actually did used to have phone service, but because I no longer use AT&T, it no longer works as far as service. But luckily, there were many apps where you could actually do fake a call and stuff like that. So I managed to actually create a fake call session involving Reptile to give it the impression that it is in fact a phone conversation. And thankfully that tablet actually used to be a phone, actually, because like I said, it actually used to have an AT&T service on it. It actually has an AT&T SIM card inside of it. So yeah, shooting this scene was actually quite interesting. And also, you'll notice that at the very end of the scene, where Larry says, "This is S," and you can hear that an ad on my tablet was playing during that time. I don't know. It just played for some reason. I don't know why, but it just did. And also, finally, another scene that I also want to talk about is the scene where Reptile and Larry are actually talking to each other, separately. So, as you can see from the shooting that I've done right here, I'm literally talking to nothing, right? So, when I edited it in the movie, I wanted to make sure that, both characters were actually having a conversation. But once again, I had to make sure I timed it perfectly. I actually recorded the Reptile conversation, his part of the conversation first, and then I shot Larry's part second. Larry's part was actually extremely difficult and was actually the more juvenile part of the movie. Basically, because of the camera alignment fail, and this is actually because my camera slipped and stuff like that, and I had a hard time trying to put it in its original spot, which is why the editing in the movie is not as hot, is not as top notch. But like I said, I will get better with this in the future. But I still went together with the scene. You'll notice how, Larry is also standing there not saying anything and stuff like that. Basically, when I recorded this scene, I actually had an audio file. Of Reptile actually speaking his part of the conversation, so that's how I was able to time it perfectly. When I edited the movie, obviously I had to mute parts where Larry is not speaking out, because in the background you could hear Reptile's conversation going on, and then when Larry speaks, I had to turn the audio back on. What's up, Reptile?
You have no idea what happened. The shizzle network got hacked by a hacking group called the Violent Ducks.
So that's exactly how I worked with this scene. It was a bit tough, but I managed to still pull it off. Most of the other scenes that's in the movie basically consists of basically the same thing. Just one camera sitting in one another and another camera spot sitting in the other. Reptile and Larry speaking to one another. Like I said, it's basically two footages compiled together to make it look like a conversation. When I actually shot the scenes where Larry and Reptile actually discover who Ricky Caleb is, I actually shot that in Newcastle, Delaware, because I was with my sister and my sister-in-law at the time, and I felt like recording it right there would actually be. I felt like recording it there would actually be pretty good. Those are actually the only two scenes where where I actually was in Newcastle, Delaware. The only two scenes that were actually shot there. The other scene that I also thought was actually quite fun shooting, because I got to utilize some of the emotional parts of the movie, is when Larry basically walks in the streets of South Philly after he has his argument with Reptile. Once again, it took place at the same place where I was at. I was at my dance school that night. I think it was on a Wednesday, I believe. I can't remember. But I was at my dance school at the time, and it was raining, and I felt like because it was raining, it would perfectly match the scene setting, because of this was during the montage where Reptile and Larry are in real time, doing things after they had their argument, especially with Reptile actually contemplating suicide, while Larry is basically just trying to get his mind off of what he had just had with Reptile. Actually, this scene was actually shot first, and then I shot the scene where Reptile basically contemplated suicide. As a matter of fact, the scene where Reptile actually did do that was actually shot days later after I shot this. And then during the same night, during that same night, I finished the rest of the movie by filming the ending and stuff like that. This was actually on the 23rd when I actually shot those. This video footage, on the other hand, rather than just constantly stopping the footage and stuff like that, basically making things a little bit more complicated, this was all one single video file, and I always constantly had to walk back to the camera and put it in another position, so that way I can jump cut it to make it seem like that, the character is actually walking in real time. Nobody honestly really cared exactly what I was doing, to be honest. So I was just basically carrying on as if I was acting, very casual and natural. Okay, that was actually unintentional rhyming. But basically, I had so much fun actually shooting this scene, and it was actually quite good. By the way, just as a fun fact, the part where Larry is just standing there for like a little while, if you'll notice that BMW that's right behind me, that actually belongs to my dancing teacher. I'm just pointing that out as a fun fact, just in case anyone cares. But yeah, that's actually my driving teacher's BMW. It's actually pretty cool. those are basically the majority of the shootings I've done for Reptile. There's really nothing more that I could say. As I stated out before, most of the scenes in the movie just consist of nothing more than just the same thing over and over again. But I would say the most complicated scene in the movie was the ending where Reptile discovers that Ricky Caleb is actually Larry. Once again, it involved a series of jump cuts, but it was still very difficult to shoot because of the camera angles and trying to figure out exactly where to sit the camera where I could shoot all the scenes, but it was still quite fun. Timing it though was also pretty complicated too, but I still managed to actually pull it off. This scene alone actually took me like an hour or two to actually put together. That's how long it was. I would say possibly an hour it actually took me to actually put this scene together, and then it took like I can't remember how long, maybe like 2 hours to actually render this just this one scene alone. Also, the real ending where Reptile walks inside of his home after he has his fight after he kills Larry was actually shot before I shot the climax of the movie. Yep, you've heard me. The climax where Reptile and Larry have a confrontation and where Reptile actually shoots Larry to death after he betrays him was actually shot after I shot the scene where Reptile walks into his home and the real ending where Reptile narrates over the ending where he says, I can't believe he betrayed me like that. That scene was actually shot before I shot the climax. The only reason how come I did that was because I wanted to see how the ending to the movie was. I basically wanted to have the end credits basically, done already, just to save me a lot of time after, filming the climax. Because I knew filming the climax was going to be extremely tough. So I wanted to have the ending credits done before I did all that. Speaking of the climax of the movie was originally supposed to take place in my basement basically as a house for Ricky Caleb, but I instead decided to shoot it in my backyard because I felt like once again it was very cloudy and it was very cold as well. I felt like that would actually perfectly match the setting of what was going on right there. Reptile obviously feeling extremely betrayed. So I felt like that would actually be better. So basically, shooting this movie was actually quite fun. I'll just have to say right now that Reptile happens to be one of the biggest projects I've ever made. It's certainly not the best project I've ever made, especially I would say it's the longest, just not the best. It's basically nothing more than just an experimental movie that I wanted to do, where basically I got to utilize at least 60 or 70% of my full potential. I haven't reached my full potential yet, but I'm eventually going to reach it there, hopefully by the time I actually get to college though. I'm still going to constantly, work on my editing skills. My editing skills has noticeably improved a lot over the course. I have been editing videos ever since I was 9 years old, and my video editing skills has only just gotten better ever since 2017 first started. So there you have it. Now you guys are really learning a lot about me. I have been editing videos ever since I was 9 years old, and I'm not going to stop. So basically, you could say that 2019 will mark my 10th anniversary of making videos. And I really can't wait for that day to actually come. So I hope you guys at least got to see at least how Reptile was shot. It was a fun movie to shoot. I actually really did have a lot of fun shooting it. My personal favorite scene from the movie, I think I have two personal favorite scenes from the movie, and that is when Reptile is having a TV conversation with Ricky Caleb, and also the scene where Reptile was arguing with Larry, because I got to utilize some of my acting to my full potential, to my potential at the very least. Since I'm a very short-tempered person, I decided to utilize my anger for the Reptile character. Basically, the Reptile character is nothing more than just an angrier version of myself. He's basically what I would be if I was homicidal. As for the scene where Reptile is talking with Ricky Caleb on the TV, it's once again two footages that I shot together. The scene where I actually shot with Ricky Caleb on the TV was actually recorded before I shot the scene where Reptile was talking to him, because it was actually just a footage that I actually recorded with my laptop camera, and I turned off the I turned off my fan lights in my room, and I had my iPhone lighting facing up at me just for, anonymous lighting. And basically I connected the HDMI onto my TV, and that's why I recorded the footage from my iPhone, just to make it seem like that reptile is actually looking at the character in real time. It was another fun scene that I got to shoot. Everything from top to bottom was really fun. Just let me know exactly what you guys think. I hope you guys at least got to give a little get a little bit of insight on how I shot Reptile. It was a very fun movie to shoot, really. Not only that, but it's just one of my favorite improv projects that I've ever made, because like I said, got to utilize at least most of my full potential, but I haven't actually reached it there yet. Once I reach there, you guys are most likely going to possibly see the best movie in Shizzle Network history. If you think Reptile is going to be the best movie in Shizzle Network history, just wait until I get a little bit further. So peace out, and this is Beyond the Infinite, and as always, stay for yourself. The movie link will be in the description below, so you guys can check out the movie. Expect to see the Roadshow and Final Cut on March 3rd. There's also, and then in addition to the movie being in the description, another link is going to be in the description. I'm happy to announce that we have a Reptile the Movie Wikia. In this site, you can see all information about the characters from the movie, and also a little more information about the story as well. I decided to expand on the story ever since I made this movie. I have Wikipedia pages on Reptile, a fictional version of myself, Crodra, as well as the Violent Ducks. And you can actually read the full history of the Violent Ducks on that one page. On top of all that, you also get to see an incident that happened in the Planet Lavon universe called the Power Outage Attacks of 2000. I'm not going to go necessarily into too much detail about it. Just know that it's basically a crazy event that happened involving the Violent Ducks and a sniper that they have hired. It's another hacking incident that they did 17 years ago in Washington, D.C., where they had government computers and hired a sniper to actually shoot security guards, as they also all ran out of the building and stuff for safety and to save the president. So peace out, this is Beyond the Infinite, and as always, think for yourself.